Join me today on an all-new episode as I look into the life of Epainette Mbeki, an anti-apartheid stalwart and community leader. Mbeki, as she is affectionately known, is also the wife of Govan Mbeki, an anti-apartheid hero and Rivonia trial detainee. She is also the mother of the second democratically elected Black president of South Africa, Thabo Mbeki.
I am an African.
She is also the mother of multi-hyphenated Moelekezi Mbeki, who is a businessman, an author, a journalist, amongst other things. Her last-born son, Jama Mbeki, disappeared in exile in the 1980s. Her grandson, Kwanda, also disappeared in exile in the early 80s. Epainette lived a full life as an entrepreneur, activist, and a community builder. She lived up until the ripe age of 98.
I'm 97 years. Some young man says, Makulu, you should live up to 100. I say, what for? For you, so that when you are in trouble, you should know that you'll come and ask for advice for me. What do you think of me?
Welcome to an all-new episode of Looks and Wisdom Sundays with me, Oluchi B. Hey guys, and welcome to another exciting episode of Looks and Wisdom Sundays with me, Oluchi B. Please say the B, aka the elusive panda darling. Honey, how are you feeling? I am actually feeling good. I'm so excited about today. Today is the last episode of the Unsung Heroes series that we've been doing for the month of August. I know it went on to September, but that's because I had like a little creator's block. I do speak about it on my wrapped episode that I dropped last week, so do check that out if you haven't checked it out. I just wanted to say that I am so thankful that you are here today watching this episode. I appreciate your support and I hope you stay until the end. If you are a new person who is watching me, please consider subscribing, liking, and commenting on my videos. If you are a returning subscriber, thank you so much for coming back. Please like, comment, and do share this content with people that you think would benefit from this information. Otherwise, guys, I know there are a lot of places you could have been, but you are here with me today. So without further ado, last episode. I'm so excited because, honey, this was like challenging to do, especially the editing part. But we got it, we did it, and I'm just so proud of me honoring the process. So today we are actually going to be talking about Epainette Mbeki. So for those that don't know Epainette Mbeki, I'm going to be referring to her as Uma Mbeki for the duration of this episode because I don't know about that name, honey. Like names from back in like the 1900s are insane. So I'm going to call her Mbeki out of respect and also because I am actually not even sure about the pronunciation for the name. So Mbeki, for those that don't know who she is actually the wife of Govan Mbeki, number one. So Govan Mbeki is actually an anti-apartheid hero. He was also part of the group of prisoners with Nelson Mandela, Walter Sisulu, and the others that were actually part of the treason trial that resulted in them being sent to life in prison to Robben Island just outside of Cape Town. So that's her husband, an anti-apartheid hero, Govan Mbeki. And number two, She is also the mother of former President Thabo Mbeki. Everybody that knows me in real life knows that I love Thabo. Thabo is my favorite. If I was born early, Mama Mbeki, Mamzanele this time, Sana, get the cookie position. They're talking, guys, I'm lying. Jokes, jokes, jokes. So the Queen actually is very fantastic, but her story is very important, and I am very happy that I'm doing this.
75% strong.
Yeah.
25% is old age.
Yeah.
I can't help that.
What helped you to reach this age? I mean, there aren't many people who are very lucky to
I don't think there's anything particular. I think it's the way I was brought up. We were brought up, we were working in the fields, getting up very early, fetching water from the springs. That makes you strong. I think it's nothing new. It's the way we were brought up.
Right.
That's right.
Right. And the food, perhaps?
And the food, all the food we ate was fresh, because it was either from the garden or straight from the fields. It was fresh all the time.
Right.
So let's get to it. So Mbeki was actually born in the year 1916 in Mongolwaneng in Mount Fletcher in the Eastern Cape. Mount Fletcher was split into Sotho-speaking natives and Xhosa-speaking natives. So Mbeki is from the Sotho natives. And then she was born off of parents Jakane and Sophia, the Morwanes. The Morwanes actually were both very educated. They were both teachers. And on top of them being teachers, they actually were also farmers who owned lands and also owned livestock. So they were actually also Christians. This comes directly from Jagane and Sophia's parents, who were the first natives to convert into Christianity. And they were also the followers of Moshweshwe the First. Jagane and Sophia actually had 6 children. So that means that Mbeki had 5 siblings. Well, that's not a lot considering that they had some coins and some money. We don't get information about where she attended primary school, but we do get information about the fact that she attended Mariazell Missionary Secondary School for her high schooling. And then after that, she attended Lovedale's Teachers College. So before we move into Durban, I wanted to make some deductions about the very little information that we have about her. So she grew up at what I would consider wealthy standards. Back in the day, if you had land, if you had a farm, if you had livestock, you were already considered to be rich because cows were currency, darling. But then on top of that, they were also educated and they were both professionals who were teachers. So double the coins. So Mbeki actually grew up in what I would consider opulence in terms of her upbringing, and she grew up in a big family and a Christian family. So her parents were 2nd generation Christian converts, and things were pretty much free flowing and abundant for her in her childhood.
Mbeki arrived here in 1935 from Lovedale College to study teaching. One of her teachers, Govan Mbeki, became her husband. Just 3 months ago, she visited Adams College. At the time, she recalled a struggle with a dead subject.
I was supposed to have a more than average intelligence. That's bragging, don't you think? So I was accepted for matric. That's the 2 years I did here. I was doing matric. And there was only one difficult subject, and that was Latin.
And then in the middle 1930s, she went to Adams College in Durban to complete her education. And in 1937, she actually started working in Taylor Street, which was a secondary school. And this is also the environment in which she would meet who would be her future husband, Govan Mbeki. And at the time, Govan Mbeki was also a teacher. And also in 1937, she joined CPSA, which was Communist Party South Africa. And she was the second woman to join this liberation party. She became very active as a member. She volunteered in the child welfare organization. She also organized rent boycotting. It doesn't specifically say on what grounds. Also, she was an agent for Inkululeko CPSA newspaper, and this newspaper was actually ran by Govan Mbeki. In addition to all of these things she was doing, she also ran the party's night school, which was actually very famous.
You know, not this ordinary love affair. It was really ideas and so on and so on.
In 1940, they actually get married. We actually don't get a lot of information about how the structure of their relationship was in those days, other than the fact that they were both involved in the liberation movement. And shortly after getting married, she actually falls pregnant with her first child, Ulinda Mbeki. She was born in 1941. And then immediately after her first child, she actually falls pregnant again with her second child, and she gives birth in 1942 to a son, the future president of South Africa, Thabo Mbeki. And she has a third child, Epainette Mbeki, in 1945. And then in 1948, she has her last child. So between her and Govan Mbeki, they actually have 4 children, 3 boys and 1 girl.
When the Union of South Africa was formed, there was discrimination against the Africans. And they were kept out of the body politic of the country. The 1913 Land Act made things worse because it confined the Africans to a small area of South Africa.
So I'm not sure around which time this actually happened. And I did try to look for this information in Thabo Mbeki's book. I didn't have the book, so I had to read excerpts, and they didn't give me like a date. But at some point, they actually left Durban for the Eastern Cape. And this was because Govan Mbeki wanted to open a trading store and wanted to move to the Eastern Cape to develop the Eastern Cape in economical ways. And this meant that Mbeki had to leave her job, had to leave her activism that she was doing, and move her life to the Eastern Cape to be a housewife and the one that was raising the children, like the primary caregiver for the children. And in her sacrifice, moving her life from Durban to the Eastern Cape, things didn't particularly work out between her and Govan Mbeki. By the 50s, he packed his bags and he abandoned his family and started moving around within the Eastern Cape. And this meant that he left Mbeki with the trading store with 4 children to raise by herself. One of the reasons that Govan Mbeki actually abandoned his wife and children was because he believed in the Marxist philosophy. And this Marxist philosophy believes that the struggle for liberation is actually bigger than blood family. So basically, he didn't believe in the family dynamic, and he didn't believe that the family dynamic is bigger than what he was participating in, which was the liberation movement. And what's crazy is that Mbeki actually also believed this. The time in the Eastern Cape was not lost for Mbeki, because she did contribute to some activism and also contributed to a newsletter that her husband was working on at the time.
Well, as a family, we're delighted with the book. The book just came out, so I haven't had the chance to read it, but Colin Bundy is one of South Africa's leading historians. So I am delighted, and we're delighted that he has put his huge talents and gifts to look at my father's contribution to the struggle of South Africa.
Govan Mbeki disappears in the 1950s, never to be seen again by the family, but we know what he was doing while he had disappeared, actually. So let me tell you what Govan was doing. So after being a teacher in the 1930s and early 40s, he moved on to be an editor for anti-apartheid newspapers. And then after that, he joined the TTA General Council. He also joined the CPSA and the SACP. And it's also very important to note that it was Mbeki that actually persuaded him to join CPSA. And this CPSA was actually a multiracial liberation movement party. So they had different groups of people from Indian, colored, white, and their main mandate was to liberate the South Africa economically. He was also a member of the ANC since the 1930s. When the CPSA and the SACP was banned, he started getting heavily involved with the ANC. And then in the 1960s, that's when they actually created Umkhonto weSizwe that would lead to the Rivonia trial. So what was Mbeki doing while her husband had disappeared? Number one, she was raising her children. And number two, she was actually minding and managing the store. This store was actually the first Black-owned store in the entire Transkei region. Another thing I wanted to add quickly about the area that they actually moved into was the fact that at the time, Black people were actually still divided into two groups, the ones that actually converted to Christianity and the ones that actually did not convert to Christianity. So they used to call the ones that didn't convert to Christianity Qaba, so Amaqaba. And it used to be not as developed as the areas in which the Christian converts used to stay. And they used to call these people Amaqobog. And this store being on the side of Amaqaba was actually a good thing, because it allowed other people to see value in choosing to not convert to Christianity.
The hard-working and dignified Ma Mbeki owned and managed the Goodwill Trading Store. While her husband became involved in national politics, Ma Mbeki raised her 4 children: Linda, Thabo, Moiletsi, and Jama.
She actually had a lot of challenges. And in 1954, there was actually a tornado that destroyed the store, and she had to start from scratch. But then she had the tenacity and zeal to do it. This was a very difficult time for her emotionally, because she's been abandoned by her husband, and also emotional strife and trauma, because unfortunately for her, her children actually decided to join the same liberation movement that took her husband from her. Thabo Mbeki decided he wanted to join the struggle, as well as the youngest son, Ujama. Moiletsi didn't want to join the struggle, and he said to his mom early on when he was young that he didn't want to be like his father and his older brother. He actually wanted to have his own life. We don't hear a lot of information about Ulinda, the female. And then tragedy struck for her again because in 1963, her estranged husband, Govan Mbeki, gets arrested in Johannesburg and is part of the Rivonia trial, which was a big, big thing. And then Govan Mbeki, with his co-accused, were found guilty of treason and they were sent to life in prison. And that was it. So it's very important to note that Mbeki was not involved in any way, shape, or form in the treason trial because she was estranged to her husband, and this time for years. But because of the way of the consequences and the fact that they were still married, she was actually roped into his life as the wife of now this guy who was part of this big scandal in South Africa. After he got arrested, she was actually getting raided by the police and the state. So they would come harass her all the time. And imagine you haven't seen this guy in like over 15 years and you're getting harassed and you're getting raided because you guys are still married on paper. In the 23 years that Govan Mbeki was arrested, she only went to go see him twice, like 2 times and 2 times only. So they didn't have a love relationship since literally the 1940s.
96-year-old Mbeki is still an active member of society. She is running various community projects aimed at skilling and uplifting others. They include Khanyisa Sewing and Beadwork, Manande Beadwork, and Kayamnandi Children's Home for Destitute Children. She says looking after the welfare of others is something close to her heart.
Working together with people has been my background because even where I was born, there were always women's organizations for this and that and the other thing. It's part of my nature to work for the progress of the people.
And in 1974, she decides to move to Idutywa to start a new life for herself. And in moving into Idutywa, she starts the store again. And also she involves herself with community service. She was part of community farming projects. She was also part of Khanyisa crafts and beadwork projects. She also created a craft village, sort of like a market. And also she was involved in education, making sure that the children get into schooling, making sure that they get bursaries to continue their education. So much so that she was actually rewarded with a renaming of one of the secondary schools into her name. And as she settled into her new life in Idutywa, she was struck by trauma again. So in 1981, Kwanda Mbeki, her grandchild, and the son of Thabo Mbeki disappeared while in exile. There isn't much information available about Kwanda's disappearance. This was probably a very sore point for Mbeki because she is actually the one who raised Kwanda in Embewuleni when he was young. And then in 1982, her son and lastborn, Mbeki, was also murdered in Lesotho. And one of the biggest sore points about Mbeki's killing was the fact that there was potentiality that the ANC could have been involved. Both her grandson's case and her son's case, Mbeki, were never resolved.
The Port Elizabeth Supreme Court upheld the ban on what was to have been the first public rally addressed by Govan Mbeki in nearly a quarter of a century, a ban that his lawyers regarded as a sign of weakness on the part of the state.
It's quite obvious that the government of this country has come to terms with itself that Mr. Mbeki is not only a national but an international figure, and they're beginning to be afraid of his stature.
Then, at a hastily convened news conference, Mbeki read the speech he was to have delivered at the outlawed meeting.
I did what I perceived I had to do, nothing more and nothing less. In many ways, I have left Robben Island prison with a heavy heart. I have left behind in incarceration my closest friends, some of the great men of Africa.
As a listed communist, Govan Mbeki may not be quoted in South Africa, and despite his freedom for most in the country, he remains a man without a voice.
In the late 1980s, the South African government was looking at banning apartheid and started releasing some prisoners and also allowing others who were in exile to return. In 1987, her husband, Govan Mbeki, was actually released from prison. They never reconciled as a family, and they actually continued to live separate lives.
I am an African. I owe my being to the hills and the valleys, the mountains and the glades, the rivers, the deserts, the trees, the flowers, the seas, and the ever-changing seasons that define the face of our native land. My body has frozen in our frosts and in our latter-day snows. It has thawed in the warmth of our sunshine and melted in the heat of the midday sun. The crack and the rumble of the summer thunders, lashed by startling lightning, have been a cause both of trembling and of hope.
And then in 1999, after Nelson Mandela's reign as the Black president for the new democratic South Africa, her son, Thabo Mbeki, was actually elected as the new president of South Africa, which was probably very nice and exciting for the Queen, because all the sacrifice that her and her family had to do for this liberation, finally her son was a president. And because of the way and consequences of a relationship with Govan, I don't think Govan being part of the government actually was exciting for her. But I think Thabo becoming president was actually extremely exciting for her. And it probably made her feel like her sacrifices were not in vain. But in her son being president, she still chose to stay and live a simple life in Idutywa and refused any mother of the president benefits that the South African government was offering her. So in 2001, unfortunately, during Thabo's presidency, Govan passes away.
Mbeki's late husband Govan met Mandela in Mthatha in the mid-1940s. 8 years his senior, Govan became Madiba's advisor and friend. And Mbeki, being 2 years her junior, she always regarded Mandela as her younger brother. Mbeki's late husband Govan Mbeki spent 25 years on Robben Island with Madiba. She says it was a very lonely time for her as she constantly worried about her husband. But she says she was comforted by the knowledge that he was in the company of comrades like Mandela. At Govan Mbeki's funeral, Madiba paid tribute to his late comrade.
In Govan Mbeki, the best traits of our movement were combined. He was a deep thinker, an inspiring teacher and educator, a fearless revolutionary, and a man selflessly committed to the ordinary people of our country.
Mbeki had a love-hate relationship with the ANC due to what happened to her last-born, Ujama. But during Thabo Mbeki's tenure, she actually voted for the ANC. That was until the ANC actually ousted Thabo Mbeki from the presidency.
Fellow South Africans, I have no doubt that you are aware of the announcement made yesterday by the National Executive Committee of the ANC with regard to the position of the President of the Republic. Accordingly, I would like to take this opportunity to inform the nation that today I handed a letter to the Speaker of the National Assembly, the Honorable Baleka Mbete, to tender my resignation from the high position of President of the Republic of South Africa.
On the 21st of September 2008, Thabo Mbeki announced his resignation as South African president. The ANC's decision came hot on the heels of Pietermaritzburg High Court Judge Chris Nicholson's suggestion that the Mbeki administration had interfered politically with the prosecution of its president, Jacob Zuma. Kgalema Motlanthe replaced Mbeki as president a few days later when he was unanimously elected by the National Assembly.
In 2008, she actually joined COPE. And she's actually quoted as saying that if she was born earlier, she would have actually joined the EFF.
And now, death could take Epainette Mbeki away from her love and passion for those less fortunate. In the early hours of Saturday morning, she bid the world she had given all her 98 years to farewell, ending a life all agree was modest but well-lived.
Before we get to her passing, I just wanted to highlight that she did a great job as a mother, regardless of how she was mothering, because Thabo Mbeki became the second Black president after Nelson Mandela. And Moelekezi is a liberated, free-thinking mind that worked in journalism, that works in consultancy, that has had his own companies.
This evening, we're in conversation with journalist, entrepreneur, political commentator and author Epainette Mbeki about his book, Advocates for Change, How to Overcome Africa's Challenges. He edited the book. It's a collection of essays by some of the foremost thinkers in Africa, looking at solutions to some of the challenges that South Africa faces and the rest of the continent. Epainette, thank you so much for joining us today.
Well, it's a pleasure to be here.
In your earlier book, Architects of Poverty, you examined why Africa actually comprises the majority of the world's bottom billion, showing how Africa's elites are actually to blame. With this book that we're talking about now, Advocates for Change, what did you want to achieve?
Well, we wanted to come up with a solution to Africa's problems. It's all very well identifying the problems, who causes the problems, what are the problems. So in Architects of Poverty, the conclusion essentially was that the African rulers, let me put it that way, were really the source of the problems of the African continent.
Unfortunately, Ujama passed away trying to fight for our freedom. We don't hear a lot about Ulinda. She was a female, so I think she stayed with her mother for as long as she could. Linda actually did pass away in 2003.
We are here to honor and celebrate the life and the work of our mother, of our grandmother, our aunt, community builder, a leader, and in my view, a truly fine lady. Mbeki is one of the unique heroines of our people who spent her life in the trenches of the just struggle for peace, for freedom and democracy in our country. She also dedicated her life building and developing our country and also developing many of its people. She rightly belongs to the generation of our people who knew none other than the life of selfless sacrifice in the struggle to rid our country of the demon of apartheid colonialism in all its manifestations.
So Mom Mbeki lives a very long life and passes away at the ripe age of 98 in 2014, and she actually has a provincial state funeral. Her sons were there, Thabo and his little brother Moileketse, and this was literally the first time I saw them together. And I was like, these people look alike. Because remember when Thabo was the president, Moileketse used to be everywhere, criticizing his brother. He criticized his BE policies, and I mean, crazy enough that he actually got a tender through the BE policies that his brother actually implemented via the arms deal, and that made him a lot of money. But we won't talk about that more later. So seeing them together at their mother's funeral was actually very beautiful and heartwarming to see. And this is what Moileketse said about his relationship with Thabo Mbeki. And this is from when he visited Thabo in exile in the UK. He says that he was like the liberated free spirit. He wanted to be like the delinquent in the street. And Thabo was actually very, very serious because he was a revolutionary, he was a leader, and he wanted to liberate the people of Africa and do these things. So they had two personalities, and I can just imagine that Thabo was annoyed by his little brother, even when they were older and he was like criticizing him. But no love was lost because they still loved and respected each other. And Moileketse says that he will always see Thabo as the big brother that he does admire. So Mom Mbeki actually did good.
You know, I'm 97 years. Some young man says, Makulu, you should live up to 100. I say, what for? For you, so that when you are in trouble, you should know that you'll come and ask for advice for me. What do you think of me?
I actually admire Mama Mbeki a lot. She was fierce, she was ferocious, and I can imagine it probably was not easy moving from opulence to poverty to creating a life for yourself and your children. So she really did well in her life, and I'm grateful for her contribution to our liberation in South Africa. And yeah, this is the last one from the series. I will continue probably next year finding other female voices in the liberation movement because we don't get to hear about them a lot. And I really enjoyed doing this, and I hope you enjoyed watching it. And I will see you guys next week. Thank you.